Good morning, everyone. Happy Teachers' Day in India. It is a joy to have Aryavan McSweeney with us. Many of you know him because now he is with us in India, not today, but he lives here now. And he's a native Californian. He is the only person that has gone through EFL as a student, growing up in an EFL family because his father taught there in an EFL school. And he is a teacher of EFL and now a trainer. So he has an amazing background. What many of you may not know is he was also the filmer, however you call the people who do the films of Swamiji, on many of his Indian programs. So if you have watched the programs from, oh gosh, what was it? Maybe 2011, 12, somewhere in that area that were done here in India, he was the one who did it. And it is my great pleasure to serve with him as one of the 3 co-directors of EFL India. So Aryavan, good morning. That is good evening to you, because you're
Thank you.
in. Over to you.
In fact, well, good morning to you, Prisha, and good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday. It's wonderful to be here with you and to get to celebrate this satsang with you all, and also National Teachers Day. So today we'll be having a normal satsang, but we'll also be talking about some themes related specifically, perhaps, to education and to the teachers amongst us. And as I think we'll find out as we begin to share, that is everyone watching, whether you're a teacher or a parent or just a human being. It's all of us are part of it. But we'll get more into that in a moment. A very blessed Sunday to you all once again. Those of you who joined more recently, my name is Aryavan. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to share on this theme, this week's theme from Rays of the One Light, which are weekly commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. This reading on ego, friend or foe. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ begins his Beatitudes with the words, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." To be poor in spirit in such a way as to merit the kingdom of heaven doesn't mean to be poor-spirited. Rather, it means to see oneself as owning nothing, since all belongs to God. For all is a manifestation of his consciousness. St. John of the Cross wrote, "If you would own everything, seek to own nothing." That which the ego relinquishes, offering it up to soul consciousness, is reclaimed forever in cosmic consciousness. Nothing is ever lost. Paramahansa Yogananda tells the story in Autobiography of a Yogi of the levitating state, Baduri Mahashaya. "Master," said a disciple of this saint once ardently, "you are wonderful. You have renounced riches and comforts to seek God and teach us wisdom." It was well known that Baduri Mahashaya had forsaken great family wealth in his early childhood when single-mindedly he entered the yogic path. "You are reversing the case," the saint's face held mild rebuke. "I have left a few paltry rupees, a few petty pleasures, for a cosmic empire of endless bliss. How then have I denied myself anything? I know the joy of sharing the treasure. Is that a sacrifice? The short-sighted worldly folk are verily the real renunciates. They relinquish an unparalleled divine possession for a poor handful of earthly toys." The Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter states, "All things are everywhere by nature wrought, in interaction of the qualities. The fool, cheated by self, thinks This I did, and that I wrought. But ah, thou strong-armed prince, a better lessoned mind, knowing the play of visible things within the world of sense, and how the qualities must qualify, standeth aloof even from his acts. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om. Well, every one of these topics strikes at the core of the spiritual path, but somehow I think this one strikes even more dynamically, because at the end of the day, here we sit on the spiritual path. We have a path laid out in front of us. We have the path that we've already walked behind us. And some days we may think, we look up at the mountaintop and we see that's so far away. But how, in fact, did we even get to the spot where we stand? Simply by taking step after step on the path. And all along with our ego, with that bundle of self-definitions, as Swamiji often would refer to it, kind of weighing us down, we think. But on the other hand, this ego of ours is the only tool we have towards our own self-realization. It is everything that we know. When we speak of being beyond the ego, generally speaking, for those of us who are aspiring to be saints, but perhaps not saints quite yet fully, we have not yet succeeded in that. We know that the things that we see and how we interpret them and our likes and our dislikes and really the whole world that we've built up for ourselves is a reflection of our ego. So if we can't get rid of the thing straight away, how can we see it as a friend? Let's put it this way. I think the answer to this question is probably yes. Ego, friend or foe? Yes. Some days it's our friend, some days it's our foe. But let's use this opportunity, and also bringing it back to National Teachers Day and talking about it from a perspective of teaching and of education. How can we see the ego as a friend? Well, I find what's very interesting in this affirmation, Swamiji talks about in terms of power, that our power is, we can misuse power. Power is able to be used to impose on others, but that's a misuse of it. And the correct use of power, the most magnetic use of it, is actually, let me see if I can find it. Rightly understood, power is the ability to command our own energies, above all for our own transcendence, but also for the good of others. And it's those others I want to focus on today, because we know that if we can master our energy, if we can master our willpower, if we can master our own consciousness, then eventually we will become free. We will dissolve our karma and be able to say, I am in this world, but I am not of it. But I find that other hint there very interesting. And I was just listening to a talk of Swamiji's where he was recounting the time when Master told him of his life's path. He said, your life will be one of service and of meditation. And we think of meditation as the tool for dissolving the ego. But of course, service is as well. Meditation is the tool that happens inside, and service to others is the tool that happens outside. And so I'd like to take this opportunity to have all of us reflect on the role on our own growth that the teacher has. Now, we all are here. We're all members of Ananda Sangha. Many of us are Kriyabans. This is our spiritual path for many of us. But some of you watching, you might have just found this for the very first time. But all of us are on a path that brings us forward. And at some point, we need a teacher to be able to help show us the way. We need somebody who's gone before to help give us input on the things that we should do. When we are 5 years old, we enter kindergarten because we're going to need to start gaining skills that we don't yet have in order to be able to interact with the world, to be able to move through life in a successful way. We learn how to read and how to write and how to play with others in a nice way, how to cooperate, how to be a good friend. We learn all of these skills, and often from a teacher, because at a certain level, we can learn a certain number of things ourselves. But Swami Kriyanandaji said something very interesting once. He said, if you learn something the very first time you hear it, it's because you actually already know it. You've learned it in a previous lifetime, and so you're just remembering a lesson you already learned. But that anything you have to take time to really struggle against and like understand and have your battle of wills against, any lesson like that, that's the lesson of this lifetime. And for a lesson like that, you need a teacher. If you want to become a great pianist, you need someone who is better than you to show you, this is where you put your hands, this is how you do this is how you do that. Oh, when that happens, you can try this. Because a teacher is sharing from their own experience. They're sharing magnetically what they've learned, maybe verbally, but many times purely through the magnetism of sitting next to you, of doing what you're doing, but next to you. They may show you a thing or two, but think of the great teachers in your life. If you had the opportunity to meet Swami Kriyananda, or maybe even just a teacher in your school, the things we remember are not usually what they say specifically. We often remember how we felt when we were around them. I know that was true for my time with Swamiji. Whenever I was around him, I felt like the best version of myself. I felt like actually he was relating to someone much better. And every once in a while, I felt tempted to sort of look behind me and see if there was somebody much better behind me, because he couldn't be relating to me. But I've come to understand through introspection and hearing the experiences of others that a true teacher like Swamiji uses his perception of you, of who you actually are, to sort of drag you up to that level. And I found day by day, increasingly, when I was in his presence, I genuinely felt that way. I genuinely felt like I was that person that he saw. And so when we think about the qualities of a teacher, I mentioned earlier, I gave a foreshadowing. You know, it's easy on one hand to think, okay, of course, Yoganandaji was a teacher. Swami Kriyanandaji was a teacher. But I can't do that. But Master said something very interesting. He said, in order to reach our own realization, we have to free 6 other people. This was one of his more esoteric teachings, and he didn't explain too deeply what that meant. But he did say of Sister Gyanamata, one of his most foremost disciples, that she was free. And somebody asked naturally, well, but I thought you said she had to have disciples in order to liberate. And he said, oh yes, she did have disciples. Now, even there, we're tempted to think, okay, so maybe somebody just at that level can be a teacher. But there's the clue in this is that idea of service and meditation. What is it that we gain through service? What is it we gain when we share with other people? What is it what is it even to teach? We're really just sharing. We're sharing something that we understand. We're sharing something that we know with someone who doesn't yet know. Now, this may ring true for many of you as parents. Some of you I know are actually teachers within a school. But even if you're neither of those, even if you're a person who doesn't have any children, maybe you aren't you're alone a lot of the time, you still have coworkers, you still have people you meet on the street, you still have the person that you buy your groceries from, let's say. All of these are the moments where we get to be teachers. All of these are the moments where we get to share something that we have learned. Now, it would be funny if you went up to somebody who you don't know and just start saying, oh, this is the Pythagorean theorem, and you take a squared and b squared, and then you add them together, and there's c squared and the square root of that, and that's how you figure out a triangle. And the person there is like, I was just going to sell you capsicum, but okay, that's very helpful. So that obviously on its face is a little ridiculous. But when we think about teaching, I think we need to expand our definition even more than we think. And for a second, I want to involve everybody. Let's all take a second and think about a teacher in our lives and think about the qualities of that teacher. What were the things that made them such a good teacher? What made them so magnetic to me? Maybe it was that they were funny. Maybe it was that they had a nice, pleasing personality. Maybe the way they explained things was particularly helpful and they were able to really crystallize something. Maybe it was their enthusiasm for the subject or just their enthusiasm for life in general. Maybe it was all of the above, and maybe there are qualities beyond what I've listed here. But I'd like to take an opportunity here to reflect on a few of the qualities I've seen and I've noticed in a teacher that can really help to exchange that magnetism. If you're working with children or if you're working with adults or whoever you're working with, these are sort of key qualities that I've noticed in studying teachers, in studying training teachers and being a teacher and studying my own teachers. One is a great teacher is usually calm. Now, that may sound like sort of maybe stating the obvious, especially for those of us who study meditation. But one of the most powerful things that you can do, and I'm going to speak now more specifically with children, is to create an environment of calmness around them. And a lot of times we want to say, okay, well, I'm going to do things that are calm, to them. I'm going to make sure they're calm. If they're agitated, I'm going to sit them down and make sure they're calm and they're not moving and they're not agitated. But actually, it always has to start inside. It has to start with us, with our own calmness. And so the more that we're able to grow that calmness in ourselves, to be able to feed and create a calm environment, not from the outside in, but from the inside out, then we're able to offer much more to the child or to the person that we're trying to share with. Another quality is that of patience. Now, I've noticed this a lot with Swamiji. Swami Kriyananda, I got to spend a number of years with him closely for a number of years. And I noticed something about how he related to people. There were a few people where he would tell something directly to, but he never really did that with me. And I was around him a lot. But he never said, "Oh, you shouldn't behave this way. You should behave that way. Oh, this is wrong, and you should do this right thing." He always acted like I was doing everything correct, and for a very brief time, I thought that was because I was, and that was good for a time. That was an important stage on my journey, but in fact, I was not. But what I realized later was, in that moment, I was not yet ready to hear the things that he could have said. He could have offered me the flaws in my world. He could have said, "Oh, you're too attached to this. Oh, you joke too much. You're too superficial," whatever it was at the time. But he never said those things, but not because he didn't see them, but because he was being patient, because he knew the time was not yet right. Every time in working with children that I've tried to offer something that I think, oh, they really need to hear this, they're exhibiting this behavior and I can just go in there and fix it. Every time I've done it from that place in my consciousness, it has been a disaster. They either reject it outright or they don't hear it at all. And then it can be much, much longer until they're actually finally ready to hear that advice. Every time that I asked myself silently to their higher self, when are you going to be ready to hear this? Are you ready right now to hear this? And if I didn't hear a yes, if I waited, almost every time they would come to me independently and ask about the thing. Aryavan, I'm struggling with this thing. Can you help me? Because the soul knows what it needs. A lot of times we think it has to be this whole complex thing. Yes, there are things you can do to sort of lay out a path for growth, but a lot of times the best thing you can do is patient acceptance. Accept the child, accept the person in front of you completely as they are, without wanting to see anything change, anything be different. And just surround them in that calmness and in that patient acceptance. Because what happens is when a soul is nurtured in that way, it's like watering a plant. You get to allow it to grow on its own. And a plant that you sort of like poke in there and say, are you growing yet? You plant the seed, you put the water on, you sort of start digging out after day one. Are you in there? Are you growing yet? That plant will not be able to grow because you've damaged its growth cycle. There was another example of a group of children at one of our schools. They found an egg with a bird in it. It had fallen from its nest. And they kept it in their classroom, and they had lights on it to keep it warm, and they were taking very good care of it. And one day it finally started to shift around and move and started to poke out of its shell, and the shell began to break. And the kids were all very excited. And so they all crowded around, but they noticed the bird was having trouble getting out of its egg. And so they thought, oh, I'm going to be compassionate here. They didn't think that way. They were younger kids. They're like, oh, the bird needs help. I'm going to help the bird. So they helped the bird knock the shell off of the thing. And what was interesting that happened as a result of that is the bird was actually unable to fly, and it actually died shortly thereafter. And it was because they later figured out that the act of freeing yourself from the egg is actually a part of the bird's journey. It's the part where the bird is gaining the strength to be able to fly on its own, in a sense. Of course, it does take some time for them to grow. But the principle here is the same with children, or even with any of us when we're dealing with ourselves. When we want to be a good teacher for ourselves, we could say, oh, you're doing very badly. You didn't meditate again. Oh, you're not being kind enough to people. You're not being calm and compassionate. Didn't Yoganandaji say that you're supposed to be nice to all people, to love all people? You're not doing that. Well, what's going to happen? You're just going to feel worse and worse and worse. But when you encourage yourself and you say, okay, I was not as kind as I could have been, perhaps next time I will be calmer, I will be kinder, I will do those things. You're affirming success, and you're doing it with inner patience. You're giving yourself the opportunity to grow. You know, Swamiji said that Yoganandaji in their ashram gave very, very, very little direct advice to any of his disciples. Only rarely would he say, this is when he saw something that was really a problem, or he felt that it would be helpful. But even so, he asked Swami Kriyananda to run the whole monastery after he had only been there a few months. And Swamiji basically was like, what should I do? And Master didn't tell him what to do, because it is through the process of doing that we actually learn. So for all of us, when we think about, okay, I want to be able to share with my child, I want to be able to share with others. Really, at the end of the day, there will be opportunities for you to share in a specific way, for you to give that perfect advice that'll really unlock that idea for them. But 9 times out of 10, or maybe 99 out of 100, the very best thing we can do is just give patient, calm, loving support. Don't try to solve it. Only try to show that you hear, that you love, that you care. I found every single time that I was able to do that when I was teaching high school, that the child was already on this more beautiful trajectory than I could have ever imagined. And if I had confined them to my ideas of how they should grow, that wouldn't do. So talk to Master in your heart. Talk to God in your heart. Say, I want to be a good student to you as my teacher, and I want to be a good teacher. I want to find you for myself, but more importantly, I want to share you with all. Joy to you all.